This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today I'm joined by Chris Davies of SlashGear. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hey, Miriam. I am very good. Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on. It's exciting. It's been a little while since I had you on the podcast last, like a year and a bit. Just as a point of reference, today is Monday, August 21st, 2017. And we're just at the cusp of hearing great news about such devices as the Note 8 and V30 from Samsung and LG, respectively. And I guess, are you going to IFA?
I will be going to IFA, yes.
Oh, exciting. So you are probably getting ready to do that. Are you going to Pebble Beach first, though?
I'm not, unfortunately. No, sadly, I know. I always seem to miss out on Pebble Beach. And I guess for those who aren't in the car scene as well, Pebble Beach is one of the maybe 3 or 4 big concours events every year where they bring all manner of both new cars and beautiful, beautiful classic cars. And yes, if you like cars, it's a good place to be. Obviously, if you don't like cars, then
even if you don't like cars, I think that there's a lot of beautiful stuff there. So
that's very true. No, you're right. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are some cars that definitely qualify as art, I think.
Exactly.
So yeah,
and you get to be posh for a week. So
which is why I'm not going, because
yeah, I don't think I could pull it off either.
Yeah, I'd have to buy a whole new outfit. Yeah,
I've been wanting to go, though. I think one year I'm going to try to go and just kind of like get a press pass or something. But anyway, speaking of big phones that are coming up, obviously the Note 8 is going to be launched. What is it, on the 23rd, the 25th? I can't remember the date, in New York, right?
Yes, that's right.
Are you also going to that?
I'm not going to that, so my colleague Vincent will be there.
So Vince is doing that. I bet you Benjamin is taking care of Pebble Beach for you.
Actually, Vince is doing that too. He goes from one to the other. Yeah,
wow.
We're covering all the bases, keeping him on the move.
And then you're going to Berlin, and the V30 will be announced, I think, at IFA at some point. I'm not exactly sure when. But I mean, these are the 2 phones I'm looking forward to. But in the interim, we've seen rumors, and you wrote about it, which is why I want to talk to you about it, about yet another Moto phone this year. I mean, Moto has been like pulling an HTC this year in the sense of like, remember when HTC used to have like 12 phones a year?
Yes,
and we would roll our eyes going, seriously? What are you doing? I'm not saying that for Moto. I think it's still reasonable, 6 or so general models. But I mean, they'd better stop because the end of the year is still a few months away, and I don't see them doing more. I mean, so the Moto X4, the Moto X series is back. They skipped that last year for the Moto Z, and there's rumors of a Moto X as a mid-range device this year called the X4. But that's crazy to me in a way because we have the E series, and I don't know if you've had a chance to play with the Moto E4, but it's a remarkable phone. It's $70 on Verizon. And it gives you the specs of the Moto G3 2 years ago, plus a fingerprint reader. It's insane. I mean, it's perfectly usable for a $70 phone. Like it's you can make that your primary phone, you as a tech person, and be like not shortchanged too much. It's amazing.
I think you're right. There's a very interesting strategy going on, or I'm assuming it's a strategy, or maybe it's just a sort of scattershot approach of, well, let's throw as many things as we can out and see which stick. There's releasing lots and lots of phones into a very crowded segment and giving them not a huge amount to differentiate themselves, which is almost like
that's the thing I'm worried about.
Yeah, you mentioned HTC. It's almost like the days back when every carrier had to have their very own slightly different version of the same phone. And depending on which carrier you went to, you got a slightly different model, or it looked slightly different.
Right. Those terrible days.
Those awful, awful days. And now Motorola seems to still be doing that this year, but not with necessarily the carrier. Yeah, just for themselves, just because they've had so many great ideas that they just thought, well, yeah, let's make another phone.
I mean, it's amazing because you have that E4, which I said is pretty awesome. Like I used to kind of dismiss the E, even though I appreciated it was cheap. But now I'm really like, I could live with that. And then the G, of course, are really nice. The G5 Plus is the one I got to play with. And I thought to myself, now this is a perfectly solid mid-range phone. And then there is the Z2 Play, which to me feels like a mid-range phone, but I guess because it's modular and it's a little pricier and has like more fancy materials, is obviously part of the Z line. And my favorite Z, honestly, of this year, because it's got the headphone jack and it's a bit more affordable. And then, of course, at the very high end, you have the Z2 Force. And the Z2 Force has been a kind of a disappointment for me. Honestly, I don't know if you've had a chance to play with any of these phones.
Yeah, I mean, I played with the Z2 Force recently, and I kind of agree with you. I think the modular idea is very interesting.
It's fun.
It is, but at the same time, it does kind of feel like they just cut out some of the features in the phone itself in order to make the modular parts more interesting.
Yeah, I think they tried to. They did not quite reach flagship grade to me for the price they're asking. Considering the competition is so fierce and pushing so hard.
Absolutely.
And, lack of OIS on the cameras, lack of headphone jack, although that was it last year as well, but I feel that's completely unnecessary. The thinner phone, the thinner screen that's shadowproof, but because it's shadowproof is thicker, and because of that, and the fact that they wanted to make a thinner phone, the battery is much smaller. Things like these decisions are really weird to me. And then the screen is scratchable, very scratchable.
That does seem to be a common complaint. Yeah, I think it's almost like they felt they couldn't rely on the mods to stand on their own 2 feet. And so they had to slightly compromise the phone itself in order to do that. So you get the slightly smaller battery to encourage you to buy a mod with a battery inside it. The speakers aren't particularly great for music to encourage you to buy the JBL speaker mod. Everything is just this, the camera isn't, so, is missing features like you say, optical image stabilization, so that you'll go out and buy the Hasselblad mod.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think if you have a bag full of mods, it's probably a very interesting device.
Who does that? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Like I like the idea as a nerd. Like I'm like, okay, modular phone, awesome. But then I'm like, but who carries that? Like, did you ever see Michael Fisher? He actually has like this carry case for his mods, like. It's like a folio for his mods, just to make a point, right?
I feel like Michael is trying to bring back the days of the Filofax and probably the fanny pack as well. And while I am all for Filofax and fanny pack life, I don't think the mass market is, and I don't think it does. I think it's interesting in contrast to something like the Essential phone, where
indeed, yes,
the modularity there is slightly different. It isn't maybe designed to kind of fit as cohesively with the core design of the phone, but I think that will serve them better in the long run, assuming Essentials sticks around for the long run. Of this idea of you're not locked into a certain form factor. Whereas with the Moto stuff, I feel like we got burnt with LG and the G5. And
oh my god, that was quite terrible. I mean, not terrible. It seemed like it just seemed poorly executed. At least the Moto mods, I think, are well executed.
Yeah, and I think that Motorola has made all the right noises about continuing to support it, which is something that LG wouldn't do even when they were announcing the G5. We were asking them, well, is this going? Are you going to kind of commit to this form factor? This, so that if I buy a G5 now and a bunch of accessories that plug into it, will I be guaranteed to be able to use it on the G6 or whatever? And they wouldn't commit to that. And that's at the point when they're announcing the phone, when they're supposed to be the most gung-ho about it. And without that, you kind of think, well, I might as well just go and get a really generic accessory that plugs into USB-C or whatever, because there is more chance of me being able to use that.
I agree completely with your assessment. I was going to say that Michael would be the one to carry a Filofax combined with a fanny pack, like a Filopack.
A Filopack, yes, or a fanny fax. Which,
I like that one.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I say we bring back the fanny fax. Not that did it ever leave? Yeah.
Oh, no, how? Okay, but specifically for mods, of course.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But you're right, you're making a good point. And so the X4 comes into this ecosystem or into this lineup. And you're like, where does it slot? The X used to be the flagship. And now you look at those specs and it's Z2 Play grade specs. Mm-hmm. But the price point is a little cheaper than Z2 Play. Yet there's a dual camera like the Z2 Force.
Yeah,
at least that's the leaks, right? So I'm really confounded and confused as to how does this fit in, right?
I get the feeling that this is the the mid-range phone that you want if you're not interested in mods, but you want a dual camera still. And Motorola is hoping that enough people do to make it worthwhile buying all of those Snapdragon 630 chips, maybe. And I don't know. It's a really curious one. I feel like the specs seen in isolation are good, but looked at in terms of the rest of the range, I'm kind of still confused.
Yeah, I mean, let's wait and see. The specs are interesting in the fact that it's running a Snapdragon 630, which is a newer version of the 600 series.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the 600 series has never been well, at least the recent ones have never been slow, and certainly haven't been bad in terms of power efficiency. So, this has, I don't know what we know about the battery, but I bet you it might have a bigger batteries than the Z2 Force, and the dual camera and a decent processor, and all in a form factor that doesn't work with mods, but because of that probably makes it more compact. The rumors are of a 1080p 5.2-inch display.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that seems like an interesting. I mean, it's certainly an interesting phone, but to me, I would have made it like a G5. Like a G5 series, like, the existing G5 range. There's a G5, G5 Plus, maybe G5 Ultra or something that has a dual camera and is basically in that realm. Because the industrial design looks very G5-ish to me.
Mm-hmm.
So why break out the X again after you killed it last year? I don't know. It's just weird.
I think it will come down to how they pitch it, and I think the battery is maybe a 3,000 milliamp hour one. That's what the leaks are talking about. Yeah,
that's going to be good on a 630.
Which is decent, certainly with a Snapdragon 630. Certainly, that's going to be very good. But I think you're not going to get this kind of the spec obsessed people who want the very fastest chipset. But like you say, the 600 series is very capable these days. And so I think if you can find that audience of people who don't so much care about what it says on the box, but just want that experience, then I think 630 plus a big battery and a decent style will make for a phone that will last all day for the average user. And if they can pitch that right, that would be great.
I mean, I don't have a problem per se. It seems very crowded, the Moto lineup this year. I'm not quite sure I understand the strategy,
Do they have a strategy? I don't know.
I don't think they have, but it doesn't matter. The reality is, you mentioned essential phone, and speaking of, still crickets, right? We haven't heard a peep from these folks in a while now.
So they apparently sent out this morning an email to pre-order customers, telling them that the phone would come within a week or so, I believe. So
I should have read the news this morning. Oops.
There's always a lot of news, and there are a lot of other things in the news which kind of overshadow tech right now. So I think you can be forgiven. But yeah, so it's coming.
In us media, we haven't received any invitation to review or anything, which is weird to me. That, I mean, if they're reaching out to the customers to appease them, this is what it sounds like to me. Otherwise, we would have review units by now, which we couldn't probably talk about. But the point is, we don't. So, weird.
Very weird. I think it's an interesting project in that I think if it was anyone other than Andy Rubin, then people would not be giving this the attention that it's getting.
Absolutely. And because it is Andy Rubin, I think he has he's always had a bit of an antagonistic, not as antagonistic as Steve Jobs or anything like that, but like he's always been a bit distant, I guess is probably the better word, from the media, right? Even when he was at Google, he was a hard man to nail down for interviews and comments and things. He always kind of passed that on to the other folks. I felt like I got easier access to Matias Duarte than I did to Andy Rubin back in the days when I was at Engadget, despite the fact that I was, the senior mobile editor there. But look, I'm excited about it. Ceramic and titanium, I'm on board.
I think there are lots of reasons to be very excited by it. It's it's a different strategy in that they're trying to make a phone which is more premium feeling and which doesn't make compromises for carriers and all the right things that we've heard a few times, but have never really had delivered on. So I would love for it to. I think it would be great to have another strong competitor in the segment, a strong and agile one, that can kind of push the envelope in a way that maybe some of the other phone companies don't do so much now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when Robin was announced, from Nextbit, they got bought by Razer. But I mean, I was like, this is cool. I mean, it's not the phone I really want, but it's nice to see, a new player. And it's the same with the Red phone, right? The Red Hydrogen phone or whatever it's called. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they pull off with that one.
And I think there's a question there, or there's an issue there about how experimental can someone huge be? Because if they try and push the envelope in terms of if Samsung goes and raids its various Samsung partner companies for the very cutting edge in display or processor or camera or memory or whatever, they have to be able to then deliver on enough units of that, assuming that the phone is then successful, which is tricky if you're selling to millions and millions of people.
And then you end up with an LG G5 that's modular but not supported.
Yes,
because they're trying to be experimental, but they're not really doing it.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of to kind of meet that demand then. So you have to maybe play it a little safer than that, which I think is kind of where the industry is at the moment. You have some very big players. It's condensed down into Apple and Samsung, and then with some LG and Motorola and HTC kind of slightly more on the periphery, and all of them kind of playing it a little bit safe.
Indeed. I just realized that thankfully my listeners are pretty savvy, but we could probably easily confuse early newcomers to the show. When we talk about the G5, we could be talking about the Moto G5, but we could also be talking about the LG G5. Obviously, the last G5 we were talking about was the modular LG G5 precursor to the G6, which is currently the flagship on LG's lineup. But when we talk about the Moto G5, we're talking about this kind of mid-range phone, lower mid-range that is mostly sold in the US as the G5 Plus, which is a slightly improved version of it. And it's really the Moto G 5th edition. But us nerds, it's like we call the Galaxy S8 the S8 or the GS8 in kind of colloquial lingo.
We like to abbreviate.
I know.
We're lazy in our speech. That's
I know
the
it's
problem.
like the N6 for the Nexus 6.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so we've talked about the X4. I'm glad your story is, and I'll link it to in the show notes, is pretty detailed on the specs and what we're expecting. And I remember seeing more blah blah on the internet about the X4 rumors, but a lot of them seem to just be like, yeah, there's an X4 coming, and here's some spy photos or whatever. And but your story was the first that I felt really outlined everything we know about it, which I thought was kind of cool. So thanks for doing that. Let's talk about cars for a bit, because I know you cover cars for SlashGear, and I'm a car enthusiast myself. I kind of want to more put the focus on the future and electric cars and autonomous cars, and I want to hear your take on the Model 3, and maybe in the context of other new electric cars that have come out recently or coming out, like the Bolt, like the new Leaf, which I know nothing about, honestly. I haven't even been reading, simply because the old Leaf was very meh to me, even though it was a very necessary car and it really helped, I think, in terms of electrification. So yeah, what's your take on the Model 3? Have you had a chance to be in one? Anything like that?
Not since the original reveal, no.
Right.
So I was coming back from Norway, actually, when they had the event in Fremont, when they handed over the first handful of cars. So I wasn't there, unfortunately. But I think it's obviously it's a very interesting car. There's there's a huge amount of interest amongst electric car enthusiasts and car enthusiasts in general, and some of them love it and some of them hate it. And Tesla definitely knows how to manage a launch. Even if it doesn't necessarily happen on time, they definitely know how to manage that message.
They're kind of like Apple in a way, in the sense that they're kind of like, they know they've got the attention and they can kind of get away with almost anything. And then they kind of mitigate some of their, challenges, which obviously for them have been to deliver on time, the Model X probably being the worst offender. but I'm personally, look, I want to be upfront. I think I've been a long-term supporter of Tesla since the days before the Model S. I really thought that they could pull it off because Elon was on board, and he did, and they did. But I finally, went ahead and reserved a Model 3 when it was announced a year and a bit ago. Very, very early on. So I should be able to get mine hopefully in October or maybe in December or sometime soon. So I'm certainly, biased, I guess. But I just want to say, look, to me, what makes Tesla so exciting, what really sold me on Tesla is, as a car enthusiast, I was one of the first tech media to drive one, the Model S, sorry, not the 3. Back in 2012 when I was at Engadget, they had this delivery event for the Model S's in Fremont, and interestingly, they mostly invited car press. Right. And lifestyle press, and there were very few tech press, and I was one of them. And they said, "Do you want to drive it?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I want to drive it." And I went in with high expectations, but I was blown away. Like, it was way beyond my expectations as a driver.
Okay.
The handling, the acceleration, the braking, the performance of the car. I could see a lot of things, as a car enthusiast that were a little foreign to me and different. Like, it's a big car. I'm not a big fan of big cars. It was, a lot of the touchscreen controls are a little weird. At the time I had a loaner BMW 6 Series Grand Coupe, and it obviously being from the, the traditional car world, it had a lot of knobs and buttons for everything. And
yeah.
It was I left that in the parking lot of the Tesla Fremont plant and walked to the press event and dropped myself in the seat of this Model S. And I felt like I was literally had just been driving the past and I was driving the future. It couldn't have been a better contrast since they're both large sedans.
Right.
And I have to say that the lack of buttons and tactile feedback for me was the big thing, the big head scratcher. And of course, I could see the fit and finish was going to be an issue for them, right? Even from there on their press cars, I was just like, oh my, for the price you're asking, you're going to have a lot of work to do to keep up with the Mercedes of the world. But at the same time, the car blew me away. And that's when I knew, I was like, one day when I can afford this experience, I'm going to get it. And from everything I've reading so far, the Model 3's driving experience is really, really good. So I'm hoping that that's what I'm going to get. But I have a lot of reservations. I mean, I'm annoyed that I can't get a dual motor high performance one. I can wait to get one.
Yep.
But do I want to wait? I don't know. That's the one thing about being a tech journalist. You kind of want to be part of the early adopter crowd, right? I mean, you kind of have to, because that's how you,
right.
I bought an iPhone on day one because even though I'm not, really a big fan of, now in retrospect, I'm not a big iPhone user. I mean, at the time I had to, I had to be one of the first, and I wasn't enough of a well-known tech journalist to really be able to get a review in it. I think maybe 5 people got a review in it, including Walt Mossberg back then. Yep. So, so I kind of feel somewhat like I shouldn't give away my opportunity to get the rear-wheel drive model, but it's not what I really want. And then the other thing is, honestly, I'm really freaking out about the lack of a instrument panel or heads-up display for the driver only.
I'm less bothered about. I'm kind of surprised actually at the amount of just sort of frothing at the mouth that has caused, because I think
I'm not frothing. I'm just
I'm not specifically referring to your mouth, but I think it mouths in general, the collective mouth is quite frothy, and I think that's strange because there are an awful lot of cars that do have this, a central instrumentation pod at the top in the middle of the dashboard, which of course makes it a lot easier for automakers because they don't have to kind of have
right-hand drive,
dashboard
left-hand
parts.
drive.
But exactly, yes. So if you've been in a Prius recently, that has a central pod at the top. I was in Europe recently, and an awful lot of the Peugeot Citroën cars had this sort of centralized instrumentation panel. So I think for me that isn't so much. I think you'll just get used to. You'll glance down at where that the numbers are. I think
you're right. I think ultimately it's like the iPhone. We can't have a phone without a hardware keyboard. Are you kidding me? That's impossible. And then you use it, and at first it was a little clunky. But when the software got better, now, I mean, I played with the Key One, and I think it's really quite brilliant for those people who really want a hardware keyboard. But who wants a hardware keyboard?
Yeah, it's
right?
absolutely it's a shrinking audience. My concern with the Model 3 sort of instrumentation in general is that they have everything is condensed down pretty much to that touchscreen and and a few joysticks on the steering wheel. And there are still times when, as much as I love touchscreen interfaces and think that they're very cool and Star Trek-y, I do like to be able to reach out and turn a dial that controls the
for
volume.
me, like the ideal car would have a big touchscreen like that. It would still have an instrument. I would actually, here's my ideal Model 3 layout. It would have a heads up for speed and maybe navigation directions and like blinkers and whether I'm on autopilot or not, like basic status indicators and speed, a heads up. And then the main display would be like it is today. But I would have traditional vents because I like the idea of just, you look at them and you immediately know what position they are and you don't have to guess. And I would want a button for the glove box that was physical. I think that's kind of pushing it too far. I mean, really? And how often do you reach for the glove box? I mean, not very often, but when you do, you kind of have this expectation that you reach for it and there's a handle or a button there. And then the other one for me is the hazards. I haven't yet to figure out. I believe by law it has to be a separate button.
It does. There are certain buttons, certain controls which have to have a dedicated.
But where is that hazard button? In every photo I've seen, I can't find it.
It's a good question, Joe, and I haven't actually looked out for that.
Because on the Model 3, Model S, and the X, you know how it is on each side of the vertical flat panel middle screen. There's these tiny triangular buttons. The one on the passenger side is the glove box open. And the one on the driver's side is the hazards button. But like, I don't see it on the Model 3. And I'm like, seriously, the hazards? Like, that's literally something that I reach out for by reflex if I'm on the freeway and all of a sudden everyone is braking like an idiot in front of me because I'm a European and I learned to drive there. The first reflex is push the hazard to notify people behind me something's up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't imagine that being on a touchscreen. That's insane.
No, I mean, I think that it will have to be. Like I say, it's one of those mandated controls that needs to be.
I hope so.
Dedicated.
This is America. You never know.
It will be somewhere.
I hope so. Yeah.
I think that the Model 3 story is going to be a really interesting one. Obviously, that they have started delivering, but sort of only just. I think as we ramp up and see more cars sort of reach people who aren't Tesla employees or who are kind of the only people at the moment who really have the car. I think it's going to be a really interesting time that people aren't being able to necessarily choose, like you were saying, the car that they particularly want with the specification that they particularly want. That Tesla's very sensibly cutting down the number of combinations that they have on offer.
Of course,
yeah, and I think after the Model X kind of launch trouble that they had and even now there being so many different kind of configuration options with S and X, they trimming it right down and only offering, I think it's less than 100 different kind of combinations. For the S, for the 3, I should say, makes a lot more sense. But I think they're selling to a very different audience, even at kind of mid-40s, low $50,000 price range.
Absolutely.
Which I think is what the current kind of the first cars that get delivered will be. I think that they may get an unpleasant shock, perhaps, at how willing to be vocal in their complaints that cohort of drivers are. I think I think people who spend a lot of money on expensive cars often have more than one car for a start, so that if something goes wrong, that they don't have to worry about getting to places because they have another car in the garage that they can use. And also, there's some very interesting research which says that people who spend a lot are actually paradoxically less likely to vocally complain in public.
It's an image thing, right?
Yeah, they don't want to complain about their purchase, or they're more easygoing because they do have this, another car that they can, or another, a replacement that they can use temporarily while the problem gets fixed. That's not going to work if, the Model 3 is your only car and you need that to drop kids off at school or get into work or, make a road trip or whatever.
Right.
And the people driving those cars aren't going to kind of be satisfied with, we're going to push out a firmware update to kind of address that. They want to, they want to know that they can unlock the car when it gets nearby. They want, so I think it's a really interesting car, but I think that all of a sudden teething pains are going to be magnified by a combination of the sheer number that they're planning to build and the nature of the audience that can now suddenly afford a Tesla and are very excited by what they've heard about Tesla so far, and maybe who haven't followed quite so closely some of the teething pains that the
originals
S and the X have had.
Yeah. I think, I mean, for me, I'm really excited about it because, I don't know. I'm a diehard car enthusiast, and I'm a little old fashioned. And in fact, I've stopped buying new cars lately because I feel like I'm missing out on my experience unless I spend a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been buying used cars, and I hate to say this, but damn it, kids, get off my lawn, right? Like having a car where nothing is nannying me or not much is nannying me is really nice. It's a weird thing. I kind of thought I would not care, but I just last summer I bought a Boxster S, a 2001. And it's a modern car. It has the modern safety features. It has stability control. It has airbags. It has ABS. It has everything that I feel is essential in a modern car. To me, I'm a good driver, but I'm not a good enough driver that I don't need stability control. Like especially on a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car with high horsepower, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to have it, and it has saved me a couple of times now in foul weather. I wouldn't have hit anything, but I would have probably headed up facing the wrong way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I appreciate it. And ABS I've pretty much, had in my car since I learned to drive when I was 19, which, I'm 48 now. So that would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of the cars already had ABS, and I've always had it pretty much. My camper van, my Volkswagen camper, doesn't have ABS. But that's an old vehicle. That's kind of expected. But if this car feels, I mean, it's a Porsche and it's a Boxster mid-engine rear drive. So obviously, adjust yourselves to that level. But wow, I mean, the driving experience, the rawness of the steering feedback, the suspension, everything is just delightful. Even on long trips, like to me, I feel like we're losing some of that. And so I'm always going to have a car in my stable that's kind of an old analog car, right? That doesn't have a lot of the infotainment features and whatever, because I don't care. I want that experience that is a bit more raw. So to me, the Model 3 is going to be the car that is going to really be the antithesis of that, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be the car that I can pull the stock on twice to be an autopilot, right? On these long highway trips. It's going to be the car that's going to be quiet and comfortable. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to it, because, I've never owned an automatic or DCT car, or, whatever they call it, dual clutch. Mm-hmm. I've always made a point of buying them stick shift. And that's part of the reason I'm also stopping to buy new cars, because finding cars with stick shift that I like is dwindling down rapidly, unless I spend a lot of money. And then even then, I have driven some DCTs now and some automatics where I've gone like, wow, like, I wouldn't want it if I had the option of a stick, but I have to admit
it's
that
good.
It's a different world, and it's good, and it's fantastic, especially if you want focusing on, like a track session, and you don't want to have to be in the wrong gear in the wrong time in the curve, etc. I mean, it certainly simplifies and makes you look like a rock star driver. But the Model 3 by its very essence does not have a transmission. Well, it does have one. It's a single gear gearbox that is not controllable by you. And it stays in that gear all the time, right? It's just a multiplier ratio thing.
Yeah.
So I don't have that anymore, and I'm not going to be able to miss it because it doesn't exist, right? So that's kind of my justification for finally getting a two-pedal car. But at the same time, I know what electric cars can do in terms of acceleration and quietness and all that from my time with the Model S, and that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to having that super high-tech car. And then, at the same time, having a 16-year-old Porsche that is delightful and very subtle in all of its mechanical feedback. My car previous to the Porsche was a Volkswagen Golf R and stick shift. Mm-hmm. And it was 2013, so the Generation 6, which is previous to the current generation. And that thing was a beast. I mean, it was amazing. But I still felt like even though I was driving stick and the car had really great driver, is a really great driver's car with lots of good feedback, I still felt that every now and then, I don't know how to explain this to you, Chris, but I felt like the hand of God was coming down and like adjusting the rear end of my car around a corner or something because of the torque vectoring and the crazy computerized stuff that was happening with the 4-wheel drive Haldex based system. And it wasn't scary, and it was actually welcome, but I just felt like I wasn't in control. You know, I felt like...
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that you are definitely the minority.
I'm sure.
If you look at the most popular selling cars in America today and for a long time, it's either an F-150,
pickup, yeah,
best-selling pickup, or it's, if you're looking just at kind of passenger cars, it's Toyota's Camry. And I don't think anyone is ever going to confuse a Camry with a rally car or a performance car, for that matter.
Of course not.
Because people want something which just starts first time, and they want an appliance car that just does what they expect because they don't want to have to think about it, or they can't afford to have more than one car to kind of tick all of the boxes. It's just they need something reliable. And so I think that is, that's what Tesla is promising. If
you're
with the
shopping Model 3, you're not that customer anyway. You're not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would argue that the Model 3, with the right level of equipment that people expect today, is going to be a $45,000 to $50,000 car. And we're talking, CLA, C-Class, we're talking 2 Series, 3 Series. We're not talking Corolla or Camry territory here.
No, though I suppose we are kind of talking, you could say high-end Accord, maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, the average selling price, I think, for a car in the US at the moment is about $35,000, which on the one hand seems quite high, on the other hand seems quite low. Tesla's obviously talking about Model 3 starting from about 35, though you can't actually buy one of those cars yet. They're not making that model yet.
And there's a $1,000 mandatory delivery fee, so it's really 36. I really don't think they're going to sell too many of those, to be honest with you.
No, I think they had to. They needed that for the selling point.
Yeah, exactly, to reach that price point on paper. So to me, like, this is why I'm looking at, so when I bought the Porsche, the car I was looking at buying new at the time was the 2 Series BMW, 240, an M240i stick shift. Specifically, because I wanted something even more luxurious and more comfortable than the Golf, but I wanted rear-wheel drive, and I wanted more horsepower, of course. Who doesn't? Of course. And I wanted stick, so I started shopping around. I'm like, what can I afford? I got all these boxes, and I drove the 228i with the auto. Mine uses ZF8 speed, and other than the auto was incredible in that car. Like, it didn't feel like an auto. It felt like a DCT. Like, the shift changes were instantaneous. I was amazed by the transmission, but I knew that you could get it with stick shift. So I'm like, okay, more horsepower in the same car with a stick shift and the same great handling, although arguably the 240 is a little nose heavier, but whatever. I was like, that's the car I'm going to go for. And then at the last minute, I was like, yeah, but it's a lot of money for what I'm getting, and I can't buy it anywhere. I have to custom order it from Germany because they don't stock any M240Is, BMWs on the lots with a stick. All of them are ZF8 speed. So I'm like, so that's when I was like, maybe I just need to go back to the past. And oh my God, it was, I know that a lot of it has to do with the choice I made of getting a Boxster S, but because it's a phenomenal car. But I think that still, there was a certain, I don't know, it still has hydraulic power steering. There's so much feedback. There's so much information there as a driver and so much play. You can play, and the nannies do kick in, but you really can push it before the nannies say, no, behave. And with the Golf, I got that. I could toss it around and it would behave, but every now and then I'd be like, I want you to slide a little bit. And it'd be like, nope, not happening. And I'm like, come on. Like, I'm just asking you, just understeer just a little bit so I can have fun. Come on. Your front wheel drive biased car, even though you're all wheel drive, you can understeer. No, it wouldn't let me. Whereas, the Boxster, even with stability control on, I can get their tail out. No problem. It will do it. It'll catch me, but it'll do it. Just kind of, and there's no sports mode. You know what I'm saying? I hate
Well,
that
it's
in
'cause
new
it's
cars.
always-
It's like, I
it's
don't need
always
a
in sports
mode.
mode.
I bought a Boxster S. What do you think I'm doing with it? It's
and again,
sports
it
mode
comes
all
down
the
to
time.
you are not most people.
No, but these cars existed back then without sports mode, and people bought them anyway. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of want, obviously the Teslas have sports mode with the what is it? The ludicrous mode.
Various ludicrous modes, and
but my Model 3, if I get the rear-wheel drive, won't have that. Elon has said that. Anyway, I digress. But I'm kind of curious to know how you feel, because you test drive a lot more cars than I do, and a lot of them are as traditional, like gasoline or diesel powered. And how do you feel? Like, you've driven cars for a long time, because you lived in Britain for a long time. A lot of cars there are stick shift and less powerful and smaller and cheaper, right? In general.
Yep.
I think American cars are generally a little bit bigger and cushier, even at the lower price point. How do you feel about the state of the industry? I mean, without going into supercar territory, which is obviously always, even like, 100K plus territory, which has a lot of really great choices. How do you feel? Do you feel that we're more and more appliancing our cars? Do you feel there's still room? I mean, there's obviously the Toyota 86. That's still an enthusiast kind of car at the low price point. But
right.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I feel like for an awful lot of people, it is just, they want something which is reliable and which they can get in and just drive, and will take them to work, and they don't have to think about it. And I think that there will always be, like you say, kind of enthusiast cars, though the options kind of in the lower price range are limited. I mean, for me, the interesting kind of time now is now that we're finally seeing electric cars that are more affordable, that have a longer range.
Yes, like the Bolt,
like the Bolt, which I'm a huge Bolt fan. I think that it's I think that what Chevy has done is really impressive in terms of the range. It's the first electric car that I've driven where the range that I've had in real life has been greater than the range that it was supposed to have. Kind of everything else, you kind of get this feeling of, well, okay, I have my 150 miles range, but that's in a best case scenario if I'm on a test track somewhere at the EPA, driving at a very set speed. Whereas with the Bolt, after a couple of days of kind of that sort of familiarization process of getting over the range anxiety, it suddenly dawns that actually this thing just keeps going, which is welcome.
I loved my Bolt experience. I was at the press event driving it down in Palo Alto, and I have to say, very impressed. I'm a little, and it's form factor wise, more the kind of car I want than the Model 3. I mean, I like the little 5-door hatchback cars, as a European. Yep. But I mean, it's a little bit too CUV-ish in my opinion, at least the looks of it. And I think that's because people want that these days. But I can't fault it too much. My biggest gripe with the Bolt, and this is why I'm going with Tesla, is the lack of charging infrastructure for fast charge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just nothing. If you charge it over level 2, you can do it overnight like any other car. But the DC fast charge is what it really needs, and it really needs it more than it exists. And the supercharger network that Tesla is, to me, is what is what we need for electrification to happen. And nobody seems to be investing the same amount of energy and money into a network of their own, like Tesla is. And I don't understand why Chevy isn't doing it, honestly.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the infrastructure side of it is, I don't want to say dire, because I don't think it's quite that bad, but I think it is very misunderstood. It's driving around a Tesla, you kind of know, well, okay, I find the nearest supercharger station on the sat nav, and I just go there, and I know what it's going to plug in at. I kind of know what rate it's going to charge at. I know the process. And I think that even if you buy a Bolt now, you get like a charge point card, which allows you to use various chargers, and it's, you have an account, and it's supposed to be very simple. And I guess in practice, it can be reasonably simple, but I always felt when I was driving it that I wasn't entirely sure where I was supposed to be going to do it. And if I got there, what rate am I going to be charging up at? And what kind of connector is it going to use? And these are all questions that, people don't want to deal with, having 3 different types of gasoline on offer in the gas station.
Right.
They don't want to have that sort of choice, too much choice. All of a sudden, it's complicated. I'm just gonna, I'll put in the cheapest one, or I'll put in premium because I know what that is, or I think I do. And I think so. You're absolutely right that there is this kind of this missing point there. Either in the infrastructure isn't there, but I think that's not true. There is a lot of infrastructure there, but I think it's not very well explained. There's no...
Yeah, and I think it's also not compatible with my lifestyle. I think I just have to be honest with you. Like that's if you are suburban or not even suburban, but if you own your own home with a garage or driveway, anywhere in any suburban or urban environment, and you have you use the intent of the Bolt is your commuter or errands vehicle, you absolutely should get a Bolt because you can charge it overnight at your home. And the range is good enough that you don't really have to worry about charging it until the night for 99% of your uses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you lived in the city for a long time. Now you live in the woods with the bears.
With the bears. Yeah.
But
and the raccoons.
The raccoons, the otters.
I don't see any otters yet. But
no,
give it time.
Damn it.
I know.
And so you lived in, was it Nob Hill for a while?
Yeah, Russian Hill. And
Russian Hill.
Parking is a nightmare.
And so parking is a nightmare. Yeah. There's no way you could charge overnight there in any, and even the closest charging station were probably inside of parking lots that were closed at night, that you had to pay an insane amount per hour to park in to use the free charging, if there was any charging. And so to me, that's kind of the situation I'm in. I live in Potrero Hill. I've got street parking. So, with the Tesla, I can say, oh, well, I just go to the supercharger, right? And I know where it's going to be one. And I know that it's going to last me 2 or 3 days on a charge for the kind of errands I run. So every few days, I just go and get like a Subway sandwich at the supercharging station down in Palo Alto or whatever. And it's an inconvenience. But the other thing is I don't, obviously have, I also spend part of my time at my place in Portland, Oregon, where I have a driveway. So I will get a Tesla compatible charger there. And that's the other thing for me. One of my requirements is to be able to drive from San Francisco to Portland. Right. Now I do that in the Porsche today. I do that in the camper van sometimes when I want to do a road trip and I'm planning ahead. Sometimes it lives mostly in Portland, but sometimes I need to take it down to San Francisco. And so, I'm used to doing this trip. It's not a big deal. It takes me about 9-10 hours with a IC car. With a gasoline car, an electric car is probably going to take me 12 because I need to charge at least twice on a Model S or Model 3, at least the long range models. So I'm prepared for that and I'm willing to do it. And I think the infrastructure exists, but that's my point. The Bolt doesn't give you that option, right? You're SOL. You can jump in a Tesla and drive across the country. You can't do that in a Bolt.
And I think that the problem is that I imagine you actually probably could. You know what
I'm saying?
But I think that the kind of the homework that you would need to do. So when I had the Bolt, the week that it came, I was supposed to have a very different car. I was supposed to have the F-150 Raptor, which is...
Wow.
And there's a slight difference. And then the scheduling changed and I had the Bolt instead. And some friends of mine came over to visit and they were going to kind of drive around the Bay Area. And then the guy who was going to be driving managed to fracture his wrist. So anyway, so they said, well, can we go around and kind of do some of the sightseeing stuff? And I said, yes, of course. And then spent the night before nervously looking at where all of the different charging stations might be. Because I thought, well, okay, I have a quoted 238 miles of range in an ideal situation. Whereas that, and again, I don't want to kind of be the guy who takes his friends up into the woods somewhere or out to the beach and then is stuck there because, his electric car has run out of charge. And it was incredibly difficult that night before to kind of put into place a plan of, well, okay, what am I going to do? Where are we going to go that will have a charger? And that charger, what kind of rating is that? And, am I going to plug in and get, the equivalent of a 9-volt battery and, maybe put half a mile of range on it? Or is it going to be a high-powered charger, but there is only one outlet and it's likely to be busy? And there are lots of websites and apps and things which will help you find different chargers, which is great. And it's fantastic. There's an amazing there's PlugShare, which is a fantastic kind of crowdsourced one where, people give big reviews about the speeds that they had and kind of how, the busy periods and the off periods and that kind of thing, which is really useful. But that's not really what I wanted. I just wanted to be able to go into a map and say, well, okay, this is where I'm thinking of going. Whereabouts can I charge up? And is it, and not have to worry about it. And so Tesla, I think, has done an excellent job of taking that confusion and sort of planning stage out of the using their infrastructure. And where the other car companies, even though that infrastructure, maybe through a number of third parties, it does exist, they just don't do a very good job of communicating that and making it really, really simple for someone in an electric car who might have range anxiety.
Yeah, I think it's very much like Apple versus Android in a way. It's like, Tesla is highly integrated. Everything is vertical. You pretty much, I mean, yes, you can charge on other chargers because there's adapters, but you're not encouraged to, and you have actually no reason to. Even if you go to a shopping mall, they have destination chargers that are Tesla branded that are not as fast as superchargers, but will maintain and or boost your charge level while you're shopping. And the first one I saw was actually in Salt Lake City when I was there once on a road trip, stopping with my camper to get a snack. And I'm like, wow, look at all these Teslas. And I'm like, each of them was parked at a destination charger at this shopping mall. And I'm like, I had no idea this was a thing. I only knew about superchargers. So I guess there's even more to it than that. So that's kind of cool. I'm wondering, have you ever had to plug in your car at home? Since you live out in the woods, you probably have a washer and dryer. Have you ever had to plug into your dryer outlet?
I haven't. We have an outdoor outlet, but it is only a 110-volt one.
Only 110. That's not going to help you at all.
And so I found that I just had a BMW i3 with the version with the range extender. Actually, I had both. I had first just the pure electric, and then I had the version with the range extender. And I've had other electric cars and plugged them into that 110 outlet. And it does take a while. It's sort of, I'm lucky and different from a lot of people in that I work from home. So although I need a car if I want to get anywhere because of where we live, it's, my normal day-to-day kind of routine doesn't necessarily involve going on long distance driving. If I had to go into an office, there would hopefully be a charger there where I could plug it in, but that I don't need to do that. So the car can, for the most part, just sit outside plugged in, and it's not fast. But it does the job. I think if I had an electric car myself, then yes, I would obviously kind of get a full level 2 charger. Because it does take a lot of the headache out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm the same way. I work at home most of the time. It's only when I need to run some errands, and as such, the Bolt I think would be perfect. But I have the added complication that sometimes I like to commute between 2 major cities, and so that's when, and honestly, I have choices of cars, so it's not like I could have an electric car that was just dedicated to one location. But I like the idea of varying my car experience, as it were. And, sometimes I like to drive this car and sometimes I like to drive that car. So not having to be stuck with living in one location, having the car stay in one location basically is one of the reasons I'm excited about Tesla and the supercharger network. I think is kind of the stroke of genius that distinguishes them. And again, I think that the legacy, the incumbent car manufacturers are still, the fact that they're not investing in that yet is what tells me that they're not really fully serious yet. I mean, Chevy's obviously a little more serious. They've shown that they can do it. But I think that they haven't shown that they are willing to give you that extra thing, which is lets you travel with your car further away. And potentially it's because, the Bolt is one, right? The Teslas have always been, we're going to make more. We're going to make once they did the S, well, they did the Roadster first, but once they did the S, it was clear they're going to make an SUV. And then they did the SUV and it was clear they're going to make the cheap car. And now, there's rumors of a smaller SUV, which of course you do. With the CUV craze right now, you need a 5-door CUV-ish Model 3 priced vehicle. Of course you do. And so, to me, that's why I think the big difference is the Bolt is a car of one. It's like right now, I don't see Chevy following up. There's a lot of ifs and buts, whether they're going to do it, something like that again. I would like to think that they will, but they are not really committing, it seems to me, other than saying, look, we can do what Tesla's doing. This is basically their way of saying we can do it.
Yeah. And I think
they don't seem as committed to me.
Yeah, and I think there isn't a kind of a history of the big automakers working together, playing nicely together, and kind of getting together. If they'd all, if the big German automakers had decided, well, we're going to collaborate on electric charging infrastructure, I think that would be very different. If GM and Ford and Fiat Chrysler had said, well, okay, we're going to sew this up in America. We're going to invest.
I don't think that with
infrastructure
and power, we're going to see FCA do anything like that anytime soon. But that's just me. So, hey, how much you know about the new Leaf? Because I'm, probably not the target audience, because the original Leaf to me was, I was actually really excited when the original Leaf came out. But then I drove one and I was like, oh my God, it's worse than a Prius.
I mean, it's definitely, it is an appliance electric car.
It's terrible.
I think
no, I mean, look, this is Nissan we're talking about. They make a GTR, okay?
They do.
Even the Altima is a nice car to drive. I mean, come on.
It does what it is supposed to do, which is be easy and very unlike a gasoline car. And, it's a practical little 5-door hatchback, which isn't going to thrill anybody. But that is kind of exactly what...
This is the second gen. So are they going to fix that?
Well, I mean, Nissan have been showing off some really interesting looking concepts for electric cars, and then leaked photos of the new Leaf came out, and it does not really look like those
but the
leaked
looks
photos.
Is not my issue. I don't think the Bolt is a sexy looking car, but it's a fun to drive car, which makes a big difference.
So what they're talking about is it will have more power, it will have more range, it will still be targeting that mass market which Nissan targets. They need to sell a lot of them. And it worked well for the first gen Leaf. Okay, it might not have won many fans in amongst people like you and I, who are looking for something maybe a little more engaging. But for a long time, it was the best selling electric car, and it was only when cars like the Model S came along and Tesla owners kind of opened their deep wallets.
And it is affordable. I mean, much more affordable than the Model 3. So I get it. I mean, but it's just, to me, it's just like, I'd honestly at that point I'd buy a e-Golf before I'd buy a Leaf. If you don't care about range, but you want a car that feels like a car, buy an electric Golf.
I mean, I guess I still think there is definitely a place for the Leaf. And I think what's been interesting is that there are a lot of people now looking at secondhand electric cars and sort of saying, well, okay, what kind of I bought into this idea of electrification, but I can't afford a brand new one. So what is there out there? And the deals on secondhand Leafs are incredible.
Insane.
Just what you can pick up for, less than $10,000 is very impressive. And at that point, you start to say, well, hang on, okay, maybe this isn't going to be the most exciting thing, but then I don't really want my washing machine to be very exciting. And I'm okay with my fridge freezer being not very exciting, as long as it does the job and I'm not spending a huge amount of money on it. So
for sure, yeah. I think though there is something to be said to me, like the Fiat 500e, which is in the current Fiat Chrysler FCA regime, kind of an oddity and a compliance car, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, that's a fun electric car, right? I mean, it's also one of the cheapest used. Now, there's a lot of issues in terms of quality, but I still think that if I had the choice to buy a cheap electric car today or a secondhand electric car, I would narrow it down to basically probably the Leaf, the Fiat 500e, and maybe the e-Golf, or an used e-Golf that's out of lease after 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's too much else. There's a Fit EV. I drove it, but I don't think they made enough for you to, and I don't think they were sold. They were leased only, weren't they?
I believe so, yeah. I think the problem I have with any of these kind of, any car basically, any electric car that isn't really the Bolt, where, you get over that kind of all-important 200-mile range, is that, like you were saying earlier, that there is a problem with
infrastructure.
Where are you going to be based? Where are you going to be charging it? So I live maybe it's a 70, 80-mile round trip into San Francisco where I am, which, I maybe do that a couple of times a week.
Right. And you can't do that with these cars. It's too short, right?
Yeah. There's always that fear of, well, okay, am I going to, if I get in there and then I have to drive around a bit, or if I want to do couple of extra chores while I'm there, or there's a last minute thing where I need to go, or, am I going to have enough power to get back? Am I going to need to, I don't want to have to try and find somewhere to charge up when I'm in the city. So it needs to, all of a sudden, the thing I liked about the Bolt was that, I could drive it in, I could drive around San Francisco, I could come back home again, and I would still have charge left. and then I could, just plug it back in again. I didn't have to worry about it. I could treat it like a gasoline car. And I think that is my concern with any of the secondhand ones, and with the new ones as well. The BMW i3 I just had, the all electric one. The range for that is just 100 something.
Yeah, it's not that great.
Which is enough to kind of make me think, well, because that 100 something is actually maybe 80 in practice, depending on how you drive. And so it's a tricky one. It's a really tough one. It's an infrastructure question, it's a battery question, and it's a price question, and it's a compromise question, and there are lots of questions.
Yeah. I mean, the way I'm looking at it is I'm going to probably go for the first Model 3 they give me the option to get, simply because I want to be early adopter here, and go through the growing pains with it and see how it fits my life. And if it doesn't, it's going to go away. And if it does, I'll probably upgrade to a dual motor ludicrous Model 3 a couple of years down the road. And that will be that. And then I'll probably never buy another gasoline car ever again, unless it's a used one for fun.
Yes. I was going to say never.
No, I certainly have a Porsche 911 Turbo on my list of one day I will own.
Well, don't we all?
It's happening. No, seriously, it's happening.
Yeah.
I'm honestly looking. I keep an eye all the time out for 996 Turbo. And if that eventually goes away in terms of availability, I will probably go for a 997 Turbo stick shift. I will get one. It'll happen. I am that crazy person. Because you know what? It's a completely different experience. It's
Absolutely.
like, for you getting behind the wheel of from behind the wheel of the BMW i3 into a Charger Hellcat. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Radically different.
Absolutely
but,
different.
Perfectly available cars today. So, yeah. So listen, I kind of want to wrap it up, but I did want to talk really briefly about what, we're going to get the Note 8 and the V30, and there's been a lot of other phones this year. Tell me quickly, what are the phones that did it for you in the first half of this year? Some candidates would be the HTC U11, the Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus, the G6 from LG, the OnePlus 5, most recently, we talked about the Motos, the Zenfone AR from Asus is getting a little long in the tooth, but of course the Pixel from last year. But out of all of these, tell me, which ones really struck a chord with you if you've had a chance to use them?
I mean, you can't really go wrong with the Galaxy S8. I've recommended that phone to a lot of people just because, the design is there, the battery life is there, the camera is there. It's a really solid choice. I think the U11 is beautiful and is the best phone HTC has made in a while. And
for sure,
when I reviewed it, my headline was, U11 review, you won't buy this, but you should.
I saw that, and I was like, absolutely agree with you.
Yeah,
it's sad though, right? Because that they're so close, and in some ways better than the others.
Absolutely, yeah. And so there's lots of chatter now that the HTC will be making at least one of the new Pixel phones for Google, and it will include things like a version of the squeezing edge sense or whatever it's called, which I think is very interesting and kind of underused at the moment. So hopefully, this will be a chance for HTC to get their devices into a new generation of hands, because I think they would be ashamed to lose what they offer. Other than that, I mean, the Zenfone AR is interesting, but still very, very niche.
It's I would not recommend this. I mean, it's fine. No. It's also a little long in the tooth. But I reviewed the Lenovo Fab 2 Pro, the first Tango phone in quotes here, because 6.4 inch display. The thing is massive. It was like a centimeter thick. But I mean, when you compare that to the Zenfone AR, the Zenfone AR just looks basically like a normal 5.7 inch phone. It's about the same size as like LG V20 or like, I don't know, an Nexus 6P from last year. And so as such, it has Tango in it, and it does all the things that the Fab did for in a much sexier package. But that's the only, it's an interim, because, we have, I don't know if you got briefed by Qualcomm on the new ISP technologies that they are announcing in the fall. And in fact, they just did a press release yesterday on that. But we know what's coming, and that means that all the flagships will have AR support, right?
Yeah.
And then Tango will just be a normal thing in the same way as I'm pretty sure that Apple's going to blow it out the park with the AR kit stuff on the new phones, because all the demos I'm seeing are way better than anything I've seen on Tango. And this is the same story again. The developer base is on the iPhone camp.
Yeah.
So, I think I don't think there's info. I'm just mentioning it because it's fresh. I just received it a week ago or something. And of course, the Nokia 8 was announced this morning, finally officially. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm gonna try to get a review in it, obviously, because I'm a long-time Nokia fan here, even though it's a completely different brand now than it was, and a dual camera setup. And you know me and imaging, so
I do.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. The U11 and the Galaxy S8 are totally some of the best. I also have a soft spot for the G6 simply because I like that wide-angle lens, and I'm certainly looking forward to what they're going to do with that V30 with the super fast f/1.6 lens.
It's funny. I didn't fall for the G6. I think it's because I don't so much use the wide-angle lens. I much prefer it a lot.
So I like it better than telephoto. Actually,
you see, I use telephoto a lot more. So
did you play with the OnePlus 5?
Briefly, yes. I didn't review that one.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I've never really got on the OnePlus hype train. I mean, I definitely think that what they're doing is very interesting, but it's not something. It wouldn't be the top of my list.
No, I mean it's a good phone for the money, spec wise, but I think it falls short in areas that to me are really significant, like the camera. Still falls short on the camera. I mean, it's better than last year, but it's still it's kind of like just good enough.
Yeah.
To today's standards. And when you see what the HTC U11 can produce, or the Galaxy S8, or even the G6, frankly, or the Pixel, or the iPhone 7 Plus, or the Huawei P10, you're like, okay, that's a lot of ors, guys.
Yeah.
You kind of missed the boat there because you're not part of the ors.
Oh dear.
Pretty much.
My word. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, listen, we should wrap it up. I want you to plug yourself, plug your blog, plug everything that matters to you that you want the listeners to go check out.
Well, you should definitely check out SlashGear.com. It's at SlashGear on Twitter. I'm at C_Davies with an E on Twitter, where I talk about usually food, actually, and cats, and a little bit of tech.
Oh, if you guys want really good food porn, follow Chris Davies.
I do like to eat. It's true.
So do I. And you actually cook too. It's not like you just eat. You grill all the time.
I mean, nothing is nicer, he said, than a rack of glistening meat. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. You should talk to Theo at some point. He's now got a grill as well in our place in Portland, and so he's been grilling up a storm. And you guys should compare notes.
It's the future, and obviously also the past as well. But we can't eat the past.
No.
See,
these are the wise words of Mr. Chris Davies right here.
This is why you should follow me on Twitter.
This is why you should follow. And this is also why I have him on the podcast, because he says things like that. All right. You guys know where to find me. I'm Tankgirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character without the vowels. YouTube.com/Miriam Jouar if you want to watch my unboxing and review videos. You can also find me on chipchick.com for my occasional phone videos. I mean, phone reviews, not videos. I reviewed quite a few flagships for them this past year. And then mobilegeeks.com if you want to find out what's happening at a trade show. I'm not going to be at IFA, but, in the case of Mobile Congress and CS, I usually cover it for them. And then finally, mobiletechpodcast.com. And I want to thank World Podcasts for hosting and editing and doing all the magic behind the scenes to make this happen. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being on the show, Chris.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.